day, everyone. Happy Friday to you. Before you start your weekend, a couple of things to think about. Will developers stop coding? Is the cybersecurity enemy us? And Anthropic got invited to the party. They've just been named in a lawsuit. We've got a lot of AI, a lot of good stuff. You're watching Techstrong Gang. Good day, everyone. It's Alan Schimmel from Techstrong. Welcome to Techstrong Gang. Happy Friday. We want to get your weekend started off right, and so we're going to jump in with some I think it's going to be an AI-heavy day, but we'll have some cyber and the usual information in there. We've got a great crew of gang members today joining us. Let me introduce you to them right off the bat. First of all, I haven't had a chance to be on with him in a couple of weeks here on the gang, but he is the future analyst on DevOps and cloud native. It's my friend Paul Nashawati. Hey, Paul, how are you?
Good, Alan. Good to be here.
Absolutely. It's good to have you on as always. Joining Paul, another member of the Futurum team. She runs her own podcast for CMOs and marketing and pretty well known in that field. It's one and only Lisa Martin. Hi, Lisa. Welcome.
Hey, Alan. Great to be with you on the Friday Gang.
On the Friday episode of the Gang. It's always great to have Lisa here. And then joining us in our Boca Raton studio headquarters, it's our Chief Content Officer. This will be his last show before he heads out to VMworld.
That is true.
Actually, Paul and Mike will be at VMworld next week, something to stay tuned for. But it's our Chief Content Officer, Mike Vizard. Hey, Mike.
Good to see you. I say the same thing every Friday. Every Friday morning, it's the same thing. Wake up in the morning and I go, thank God it's Friday. And then about 5 seconds later, I say, holy crap, it's Friday. So there you go.
That's the Gemini effect of Fridays.
Right.
Yeah, I'm actually looking forward to the weekend. It's been a bit of a crazy week, but I was actually glad to be here in Boca the whole week. I'm here most of next week. Then we got the holiday weekend, and then boom, we're into football season. But I'm not going to get it started on football season. Don't worry. Let's first start off though. The AWS CEO made some comments on a Business Insider article here.
Yeah.
What do you got, Mike?
So Matt Garman had a town hall with the AWS employees where he suggested that it is probable that developers won't be coding at some point in the near future. He wasn't quite specific, but somewhere in that maybe 2 to 3 year window. And the premise behind this is that in the case of Amazon, they have an offering called Q that is a chatbot that writes code, debugs code, and has a reasoning engine behind it. And that business users and even individuals will be able to write their own applications. There's a notion that we're going to have personalized applications where this chatbot will just create something that says, help me monitor all my fantasy league stuff, and it'll just create an app for you right there on your phone. And some people are even saying we'll have more software in the next 2 years than we've had in the last decade. But Paul, I want to come to you on this. How feasible is all of this in your mind? Should developers kind of stop thinking about the physical act of coding? And if they're not coding, what are they doing?
Well, Mike, first and foremost, I think I need to have Amazon Q or something help me with my fantasy team, because God knows I can't get my fantasy team to work over the last couple of years.
I've had a bad couple of years too, Paul, but it was appealing to me too when he said that.
So, but look, I'm joking aside. Look, I think that there's, looking at what Garmin said, and everything is taken out in context, right? And what's said. You have a soundbite that's kind of, it's a soundbite that's gonna like, do more news, right? And kind of drive more attention towards what we're doing. There's no surprise. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, or actually a month or so ago, I was at AWS Summit, and Q was top of mind, and working towards the desire to have the lines of businesses as well as IT, have a rapid development of code. So, the exact quote that kind of came out was, if you look forward 24 months from now, it's possible that developers are not coding. And the key word there is it's possible that developers are not coding. If you've listened to any of my previous, recordings or sessions or segments that I've been on, I made the analogy of Stonehenge, right? I've said, if you put your hands underneath the rocks, I don't know how Stonehenge was done. You get these big rocks, put the rock on another rock. But if you put as many hands underneath one of those big rocks, I still don't believe that you can lift those rocks. I couldn't do it. So, I think that it's the same analogy when you look at coding. Right. And what I like about the statement, and this is kind of what goes along with the whole AI process, is, Q and as well as the rest of the industry, Amazon and Q and the rest of the industry is moving towards customer demand. What we see in our research is organizations are looking to put out code very rapidly. Actually, 8%. I should say 24% of respondents of our recent research survey, developer surveys, indicated they want to release code on an hourly basis, but yet only 8% are able to do so. And part of the reason they are able to do it, only 8% are able to do it, is because they don't have enough bodies being thrown at the code. We also see in the research that development of these applications are happening very, very quickly. We see at the edge sites, at edge locations, we're seeing 500 to 1,000 production applications over the next 2 to 3 years. With all of these applications being created, to have a centralized development team creating them all is pretty much unattainable. And you can't do it unless you have the tech stack to support this. And I think that's, again, out of context that was said, I think the idea here is these tools that are being put in place are to enable developers to work more efficiently and develop code and applications more efficiently. Everybody wants to say, oh, AI is taking over the world. Oh, I'm going to lose my job, everything, yada, yada, yada. And, I think that the idea around it is, and if you kind of look at where these conversations go, organizations are hiring developers that are knowledgeable in AI. They're not going to hire developers that are not knowledgeable in AI because the AI is a productivity enhancement. So if you don't know how to use AI and the AI tool sets in Amazon Q, et cetera, then that's a disadvantage to the developer. So it makes the developer more marketable if they know the current tool set. So that's where I think it's all going. Mike, Alan, Lisa, I think it really has a lot of potential, but I don't think we're nearly ready to have a human out of the loop.
I have some thoughts.
You do?
Yeah.
I'm shocked.
There's gambling going on here. To me, look, I appreciate the AWS CEO giving us all a clickbait headline, but clickbait nonetheless. I think this is more akin to the low code, no code kind of industry that's grown up. And you're going to see two flavors of AI-driven code and AI-driven applications like this. One is what, generally we refer to now in the no-code space as the citizen developer. So the non-coder, Paul looking to get a fantasy football app, helping him out. The people in marketing, right, who need something. I don't want to call them simple apps, but they're simpler. They're simpler apps. They're, get me down and dirty. I need something that does this, this, and that. And I'm not a coder, but if you can give me an AI bot interface, I describe what I want this app to do, and the bot can do it, and it's a relatively simpler thing. Boom, I don't need to go through IT. I don't need to go through QA. I don't need to play that whole game, and I can get it done right now, not 4, 5, 6 weeks from now. I think there's a great use for AI for that. AI will be the no-code alternative for citizen developers. For professional developers, AI will be a great help. As our friend John Willis says, if you boil it down, 30% of your code might be coming from your AI, 40%. It'll get better. Maybe it gets to 60%. But the coders are still going to be coding. I think when we get into enterprise level applications, AI is not going to replace your developers or stop your developers from coding within the next 5 to 10 year window.
Yeah. Paul,
20 years difference.
Paul, I got to say, I laughed when I read the story just because the first thing that came to mind to me was there are trillions upon trillions of lines of existing code out there that were written by humans that I might be able to train an AI engine on, but they're probably not always, shall we say, highly consistent because, well, the code was written by humans and it varies widely. It seems to me humans will be needed to support that. They'll get some help from AI, but they'll be needed to revisit that code and understand how it works for much longer than you're forecasting, I think. But Paul, what's your take?
Yeah, well, I think, Mike, that makes a lot of sense. The thing that I want to echo what Alan was talking about. Look, low code, no code is not new, right? I mean, the likes of Mendex or OutSystems or Progress Software for over the last 10, 15 years have been focusing on the citizen developer and trying to enable the citizen developer to create and be self-sufficient and enable themselves. The term that a lot of analysts will use is those low code, no code solutions are systems of engagement that attach to existing systems of record, right? So you end up having these larger systems of record, which is, Mike, the code that you're talking about, which is, lots and lots of applications that have traditional monolithic or applications that have been built over the years. Those are typically encapsulated into systems of record and used as such. They're left as a touch point of a data set, or in the latest buzzwords, right? It's an LLM, it's a data pool that's being used. That's the data that's being touched, and it's part of the heritage environment. New applications that are being created in the front end, those are all new, right? Those are all ways to attach to those existing data sets. The advantage here is where AI and the intersection of API integration come together. That's going to be interesting because now we have these new systems of record. These new systems of engagement attaching an existing system of record, and it's going to be multiple. They have to have different connectors and make sure that all those work. So attaching your AI system to an LLM in the back end, a data lake or data pool in the back end, all that needs to be connected in, and interoperability needs to work seamlessly. Again, AI is not smart enough right now to do that by itself. Mike, to your point, there's so many different levels of code that hasn't been harmonized in the industry that you need to have that bespoke solution that works for each one. That's where the system integrators or the system delivery partners come in and they really help deliver those solutions.
To all those citizen developers out there, no offense, but the truth of the matter is most of the applications that those citizen developers build are A, ugly, B, poorly designed and don't scale, 3, riddled with cybersecurity vulnerabilities because they know less about cybersecurity than professional developers who aren't very good at security either. That was yesterday's show. So just because I have AI, I don't think that all those things magically get fixed. So I'm wondering, at some point, that citizen code is going to need to be reviewed by somebody who has some sort of professional sensibilities about how this thing might actually work, and for a large number of people, because the way you write business logic and code for multiple people is fundamentally different than what you do for onesie twosies.
I think that I respect your opinion. Let me say that off the bat. But I think today's no-code solutions are a lot better than that. Forget the AI piece of it for now. Yeah. I think today's no-code applications, that you're building with building blocks and stuff that have all been tried, true, and tested, they're pretty secure. They're pretty good. I mean, you'd be surprised what you can build in today's no-code, vector sets or whatever you want to call it.
Absolutely, Alan. The solutions that are in market today have evolved to the point where governance, compliance, and regulations are built into the platform. Like the ServiceNow solutions or the the other ones that are out in the market. They have the guardrails in place. And Q here, Amazon Q, is set up to have those guardrails in place that you're protecting the citizen developer from hurting themselves. You do have to have a corporate governance and compliance regulations. Otherwise, we're no different than we were 15 years ago with shadow IT, and things are just kind of happening, and then you're out of compliance and data's going all over the place. That's something that's been certainly addressed with these new solutions that are in the market today. That is, but Mike, and also to Alan's point, that's table stakes. That is no longer a nice to have. That's a requirement to create. And you can't unleash your lines of businesses and say, go create applications. And then they have to, they create these security breaches and such. That's a non-starter. So obviously these solutions that are in place have those checks and balances, as part of the solution.
Absolutely. But look, you know what? I don't want to, this is not a black and white issue of how much AI is going to replace and or help developers. And I think we're seeing it evolve and continue to get better day to day to day, literally, right? In terms of the quality that AI is turning out. So longer term, certainly it's going to be a lot easier to create the most sophisticated systems of record, even using AI. But I don't think it happens in a year or two, and that's really the issue. But anyway, we're about out of time on this particular block. Let's take a quick break here on Techstrong Gang. We got an interesting little promo there we're going to play for you, and then we're going to come back and say, in terms of cybersecurity, have we met the enemy? And it's us.
All right, folks, we're back. We have a story on Security Boulevard this week talking about how lots of sensitive data is still mishandled in organizations. We just don't have the right culture for managing this data. And it actually goes back to the previous block where I'm going to disagree with Paul there. There's just because I gave you data governance tools doesn't mean you use them. And it doesn't seem like most of these people are actually using any of these tools because, well, it's troublesome. It gets in the way of some workflow in their minds, but we have the ability to mask sensitive data. The survey suggests we're not using that capability. And primary culprits in this thing is, surprise, surprise, business intelligence analysts that you find in the marketing and the finance department, and developers who are copying data from production applications and just throwing it into production and in pre-production environments that are not especially secure. And auditors are finding this stuff and apparently billing people like crazy for the trouble. Let me start with Lisa here. Is in marketing, it seems like there is just a lot of sensitive data floating around through these applications that people download and analyze, and they're not really concerned about what's in there, and yet the bad guys are just stealing their credentials and going to town. So do we need to kind of rethink our approach to data from your perspective?
Definitely. And I think this is where this triumvirate between marketing, IT, and security really comes into play to work together to develop data minimization strategies. Let's start reducing the amount of sensitive data that's collected, how long it's stored, how it's processed, come together to really invoke data retention policies that are articulated publicly. I think data governance is another area where marketing can come in and partner with IT and security to really establish these policies so that the sensitive data that needs to be there, whether it's for application development or marketing strategies to convert prospects into sales, is managed accordingly with organizational activity. And then I think it also comes down to training and awareness from a cultural perspective. It needs to be consistent. I always say that with respect to marketing, that these training programs need to be for employees, need to be for contractors. What are data protection best practices? What are data handling procedures? Why is data security so important? And as an employee or a contractor, what is your role in that? And ultimately, if and when there is a breach, the marketing folks need to come in and help from a response perspective. But I think they can help from a data minimization perspective if that triumvirate works well together.
So to quote a Disney movie, this is a story as old as time. Look, I remember it's still secure back in the early 2000s when the folks would go to lunch, we'd walk around. It was at an incubator. The Mobius Venture Capital Incubator was our office, and we'd walk around the pit, where everybody's computers were. And if we saw any passwords on a Post-it, we'd log in and lock the machine and change the password. People would come back from lunch and say, "Oh my God, I can't get into my machine. I'm locked out." Well, that's what you get for leaving your password on a sticky when you go out, right? I remember going, when my kids had braces, orthodontics, I remember going to the orthodontist's office and I had set up a plan where, my insurance paid a pittance and I had to pay $5,000 and you paid it monthly. And lo and behold, those braces stayed on just long enough for you to pay the remaining balance off. So I gave the lady the credit card and she, again, same thing. Right there, right? Just on a little, she had like a little steno pad that she'd write your stuff in. And I was only maybe the 35th credit card on that list, but they had person's name, credit card number, expiration, CCV. And I said, "What do you do with that?" She says, "Oh, we keep it right here and I bill it every first of the month." It's quite a system. I said, "Well, doesn't your credit card provider give you like a vault or something?" They said, "Oh yeah, we put it up there too." I didn't say anything. It wasn't my office, and that's only in small businesses, right?
Yeah.
But this goes on in larger businesses too. People don't realize, and credit card data is a no-brainer. Passwords onto a machine, no-brainer. But when we get to things like PII even, your date of birth, all of this is confidential data.
I'll give you an example that I heard when doing this story where a fellow was telling me he worked in a financial services firm in Boston, and the development team knew how much a famous basketball player kept in his checking account all the time because they were constantly using that data to build applications. And they'd be like, "Oh yeah, we know that guy. Oh look, he still got this man."
Yeah.
And it was none of their business actually, but I'm sure it wound up being barroom chatter.
Oh sure. Look, remember selling the Michael Jackson health data when that happened? Lisa, you're right. It's an education and training issue, but we've thrown a lot of money at education and training, and I'm not sure we've gotten our return on investment there.
I think humans are the weakest link from a security perspective. You've known that for a really long time. I have this friend that I've hosted shows with before, and he makes stickers, and he had the sticker on his laptop that said "Humans ruining everything since forever."
Right.
And it was cheeky and it was funny, but that's the weakest link. And that's where that awareness and training, to your point, Ellen, a lot of money is spent there, a lot of time invested and resources invested, but it has to be there because eventually they're going to catch the people writing the passwords down. I worked with a client LastPass and really how they're helping multiple generations to stop doing that because it's that human that's opening the gates to the kingdom.
Yeah.
The part that drives me crazy. Oh, go ahead.
Go, Paul.
Sorry, Mike. There's actually an interesting perspective here that I look at it and listening to how we're going through the data here and such. In order to recognize that return on the education that's in the space, in order to put some checks and balances in place, it does come down to accountability. And when I think about software development and I think about the executive orders that have been put in place for compliance and the SBOMs that have to be, you have to follow these specific rules and such. When if you want that accountability, if things are not happening, and if compliance and regulation is broken, then there's penalties to be paid. That's when you start kind of saying, okay, the emphasis is no longer just on an education being a nice to have, but it's a requirement in order to not get those penalties, right? And if you start enforcing those penalties, then that will kind of drive better behavior in theory. But I do think that the compliance and regulation, when it comes back down to the releasing of the code, when it comes down to the releasing of the sensitive data, there's tools in place. I mean, we have solutions in place today that manages PII and all the other sensitive data appropriately. They're not being used because the pain is not worth the using the systems. And if the pain was in place to say, oh, if you don't use this, you're going to be penalized, then that would enforce the use of protecting that sensitive data.
So the part that drives me crazy about all this is that, so we will have some end user will put all the customer data in some sort of spreadsheet or BI application or whatever it is. Their credentials get stolen, they get hacked. There's a big data breach, and by golly, it's the cybersecurity guy's fault.
Well, ultimately, yes, the cybersecurity guy is responsible for the breach. But, I think part of the reason is that the cybersecurity guy has been the boy who cried, and it oftentimes is the boy, way too often, is the boy who cried wolf, right? The cybersecurity guy is always yelling about this, and you got to be more sensitive, and you got to be more concerned, and you got to. No one cares but me. We're the only one who cares. We're the only one who cares. I told you this was going to happen, right? That's your typical cybersecurity cycle, and it's been, again, a story as old as time. The buck stops at the cybersecurity guy, but this is a organizationally wide thing, and that's one of the reasons why you had the rise of the CISO, because the cybersecurity team realized that to get this at the organizational level, they had to have a seat at the table. They had to be part of the IT team. They had to be part of the executive, a voice at the executive level, because just the cybersecurity team alone can't do this.
I don't know. I think it's like blaming that.
Alan, the point that I think is interesting there, and Mike, you brought it up, is somebody writes down their stuff, they have it in a tool, they have it in a spreadsheet, they have it this. It's the tools that are being used are not being regulated as well. Like, why do we have to have multiple versions of the PII data to have everybody have their individual information and a spreadsheet on their desktop, say, so to speak? That doesn't necessarily work these days, right? I mean, and back in the day when you didn't have centralized systems and you didn't have ways to communicate, and I mean, everything that is, that needs to be protected needs to be in a single source of truth. And if you're letting the data out there, then it's not necessarily the security team's fault, although they should be protecting. I agree with Alan. They need to be protecting everything. The other side of it is the governance of the organization says, but these are not the tools that we're using anymore. We shouldn't be using individual spreadsheets. We shouldn't be using a Word document or writing it down on a piece of paper. That's just not how we do it, right? We use the centralized location. The data is protected, and that tool is in place to protect the sensitive data. If that's not in place, then that organization is not mature enough to even be working in that space anymore.
I feel like blaming the cybersecurity people is roughly akin to blaming the fire chief because you went out and left 8 candles lit in your house while you went to the store, and then come back and surprise, your house is on fire. So
yeah, but the fire department is supposed to inspect to make sure you don't leave lit candles.
Well, they can inspect every day. It's not a personal responsibility.
But to your point and Paul's point, you could legislate till the cows come home. It's not going to stop that lady at the orthodontist's office from having her little steno notepad. It's not going to stop. I mean, I've been using LastPass, or I don't use LastPass anymore to be fair. But a big shout out to my friend Chris Hoff, who is the chief security guy there, and he's done a hell of a job in some very difficult times. But, I've used LastPass or another password manager for going on 20 years now. And I've got my wife on it, my children on it. I've gotten a lot of people here in our office on it. And we switched to another product, 1Password, recently because we switched. And I made sure I tell everyone here to use 1Password. But then I ask my IT people, because we can tell who's using it and who's not, and who's putting passwords in there and who's not. And I'm telling you, half the people here are not using it. It is.
That's a hard thing to change.
Human behavior here, and changing that is more than just maybe instituting new rules. There's probably going to be a carrot and a stick, and and going around and locking you out of your machine because you left your password exposed is a good. You do that enough times, people stop doing it.
WordPress will just issue another one. So yeah.
This is also true. No, it wasn't the WordPress. It was your machine. You couldn't log on to your machine. Mm-hmm. Do I feel sorry for the cybersecurity team because they get blamed when it hits the fan here? Yes and no. Yes and no. Education and training is part of their mission.
Yeah. I kind of wish we were going at this at the school level, right? It's really about having an understanding for data hygiene, almost the same way you would think about data stewardship and civics, right? This is not your data that you're playing with here in a spreadsheet. It's somebody else's data that your customer who is essentially lending that to you, and you need to treat it as such. And I think we get it in our heads that all the data we collect somehow or other is our data, when, it's not really. It belongs to other people.
This is like getting salespeople to use a CRM. You ever have that problem?
Oh, yeah, I know it well.
Salespeople hate using CRMs. They do. I mean, they like to see the insights that a CRM can give them, but they don't want to put everything into the CRM. And then I'll give you a perfect example. Security team says, hey, we're putting a new password policy in place. You're going to change your password every 60 days. It's got to be 12 characters, 2 special characters, alphanumeric and capital. And every 60 days, you're going to change it. People hate that. Mm-hmm.
Every sales rep I know basically has 2 CRMs. There's the one in the office, that's the system of record. And then there's the one that's sitting on their laptop that they're using to manage.
Which is a spreadsheet or something.
Right. And
so, so I think, is the enemy us? Yes. But the real enemy here is human nature. And when you figure out how to change that, let me know, because let's go start a new business.
We can we can start it. We're starting it right here with this conversation. Right?
Absolutely. Hey, we beat this one up enough. Let's take a quick break. We're going to come back here on Techstrong Gang today. And you know what? Anthropic wanted to be one of the big boys. They are. They're added to the lawsuits around AI copyright.
There you go.
We'll talk about it. You're watching Techstrong Gang.
All right, folks, and to Alan's point, yes, Anthropic joined the big boys. They got sued by an authors guild, and so now basically they are being held to account the same way OpenAI is. I believe it was Sam Altman who said, you can't build these large language models without using copyrighted material. So here we are. I guess maybe it should be just one lawsuit, class action, streamline the whole process for everybody. But what is your take on this fair use versus copyright issue? Because the guild authors are hanging their hat on a ruling that goes back to the Andy Warhol Foundation, and they're saying that if you can easily license something, there's no reason to steal it from you with fair use principles.
I think the key word there is something. This is everything. Mm-hmm. I mean, so by their very nature, these large language modules are large, hence the word large in large language module. And so just grabbing a picture of a tomato soup can and licensing that from Campbell's is very different than licensing the body of knowledge on a given on the internet or a portion thereof. And I think that's the issue. Do you expect Anthropic and OpenAI and any of the other AI, trained providers out there, training providers out there, to go and license every single thing that's out here on the internet, or at least even as a threshold, ascertain what's licensable and what's not licensable? If it's not licensable, maybe I could use it anyway. That's a job. I don't know if that's possible.
We have seen, Lisa, I'll come to you. We've seen several of these types of licensing deals.
Yeah, yes, you're talking about like the New York Times and some of the bigger publishers that may deal with OpenAI.
We just announced OpenAI partnership. Yep, this week.
So I will tell you, those are flies on elephants. Okay. Mm-hmm. What percentage of information that OpenAI is using to train ChatGPT is represented by every single publisher that they've licensed now? 2%, 1%, 0.5%? This is, great for Condé Nast, great for the Times. Hey, just a quick shout out. Techstrong's willing to license our stuff to any of you out there, right? If Anthropic, AI, OpenAI, any of the other ones want to license the Techstrong library, Alan at techstronggroup.com. Happy to talk to you about it. But this is it's only a small piece. It's a drop in the bucket of an ocean.
Just because something is difficult doesn't make it right. So I would argue that,
I'm not saying it's right.
Right. All right. So these guys got to come and conform to standard copyright licensing agreements.
Yes, they do.
Since the dawn of time. Do. So therefore, I'm not quite clear why they're not just going to cut to the middle and settle, because it seems like they're just
settle this instant suit, or because once they settle this one, there's 700 behind it.
Right. So come up with a standard formula. They could use their large language model to come up with some sort of standard formula that's
so we're going to
fills up.
Let's play that out. So we're going to create a class action suit, and the class represents every single being or organization or entity who has contributed information that is available on the net that these people may or may not be using as part of their AI training.
They would have to sign up to be part of the suit.
I'd like to be the lawyer for that suit, because, as usual with class action suits, the big winners will be the attorneys.
Anyway, we got through the cigarette industry. This is similar.
Well, no, they're evil. But that being said, I mean, think about it. You're talking, Ali, Carl Sagan, billions and billions of people who are, have content out on the net that's being used in these trainings, and the amount of money you're talking about is going to be really billions and billions. The question is, what makes my content more valuable than yours? Or do we all get paid a flat fee depending how many bytes we've put out there?
I think you can, if you want to negotiate, you can negotiate. It'll take longer and harder, or you get the easy button and here's the form and fill it out and you're done.
So maybe for an individual, that might be right? Hey, I'm willing to, all of my data that I've contributed out in social media on the internet is available for training to any of the AI consortium vendors who are paying, and I get a check for 35 cents.
Maybe we as a publishing firm, we put a form on our site and says, here, fill this out, and then you can use our content. After
they're not paying us?
After they say,
okay.
The publisher's going to want to get that.
I feel like that Batman meme. No, they have to pay us.
Yeah.
Paul, Paul, Lisa, Mike and I have rambled enough here. What do you guys think?
Yeah, thanks, guys. I think the trends are interesting. This is Anthropic's second case. I like how you tease the segment with Anthropic wants to join, the big club what they have now. What I wonder is this the partnership route that we talked about, the Condé Nast OpenAI partnership that was just announced earlier this week? They're being sued by the New York Times, for example. This is a trend we're seeing with the lawsuits. Is the other trend the partnership route? And is that sustainable? We don't know. It's new. It's newish. We don't know how sustainable that is. We don't know if the publishers are being paid enough for the content. Alan, you bring up a great point. This is a fly on an elephant. What's the rub? what's the right thing for these organizations to do? We all want, those of us that use ChatGPT and Claude, Perplexity, we want the systems to be helping us from a productivity perspective. We also know on another level that the data has to be there, has to be accurate for these models to help us. So what I struggle with is, where's the rub? Is this a sustainable model on the partnership side? Is it not? What's the right answer? I don't know, but it's a very interesting time because we want these LLMs to be helping us to become better at our jobs. And frankly, we've got some skin on the game too.
Yeah, Lisa, absolutely. And when we, I was listening to the conversation and the discussion and been doing a lot of research around this as well. As an analyst, my product is my research, right? And that's what I go out there and I, find out this information. I find out market data. I find out data points. And on every one of these sessions that we're on, these recordings, I drop some data points, right? And that's good. So in my mind, the data points are public domain because I'm sharing it on these forums that we're on, whether it's written or video, whatever. And as I'm kind of thinking through the conversation here, the only thing I ask from these platforms is attribution of where the data comes from. Because, I can write down on the back of a napkin some stat, and all of a sudden that's the stat. Paul Nash, what he says, the stat. And now all of a sudden that's sourced. And but the thing is the LLM and the AI systems that are out there, they don't have accountability. They're just tools to facilitate information they find so they can provide false information, which they do, right? And that information that's false has no attribution to it. The reality of it is the user of the tool needs to validate where that information comes from. Now going back to the copyright piece, when a tool like an OpenAI or Meta or whatever, Anthropic, whatever tool you're using, if they use data that they find, attribution of that information needs to be somewhere in the source, somewhere in that file, because if it's not, it could be just made up data. And again, that goes back to the user saying, well, why am I taking this AI engine as like the source of truth when it doesn't have any validation about the information it's providing?
Just clarify one point. That little data point that you just shared is copyright Techstrong Group 2024.
And anything on here is, in spite of what he says, you got to pay to use it. But so let me put a little fly in that ointment, Paul. If it was just a question of simple attribution, I would say we could probably do it, right? I think we deal with that here at Techstrong, right? I forgot what. There are various publications that put out statistical data, and sometimes we'll quote them in an article. And quoting them in the article and attributing back to source is good hygiene. By its very nature, though, what AI is doing is taking that data, let's call it background data, and synthesizing based upon it. It's a different calculation. It's not simply spitting back data with an attribution of where you got it from. It's based upon that data and other data. It synthesizes new data.
Sometimes.
And that's a different animal.
Sometimes it doesn't synthesize. It gives back word for word.
Sometimes it does, you're right. But theoretically,
right.
The way, and I'm not an AI engineer, we can get John Willis on here to give us a 20-minute or 30-minute explanation. But the way I thought these AI things work is it works one word at a time. So based upon this last word, that's where it figures out what the next word is and what the next word after that is and what the next word after that is. So it doesn't say, oh, he's asking for something that was in Paul Nashawaty's report, so I'm just going to take that first sentence from Paul's report. And then it'd be very easy to attribute that to you. But that's not the way it works. It says, well, immediately following this word, this is the most likely word that follows it.
Sometimes it goes awry and it will take an entire page from an author's work and deliver that as quote unquote synthesized without the attribution. Sometimes comedians are saying, their jokes are being stolen left, right, and center because the LLM decides.
I think that's more of a case of parallel evolution, right? So if let's take the comedian's joke.
Mm-hmm.
There's only so many ways you could go with why did the chicken cross the street, right? And we've all done a lot of those permutations. So it's bound to have a similar story or a similar punchline because there's only so many ways for it to go in the infinite universe. I think it's one word after the next. I think that's the rule of how it works.
So one other point then, Alan, I would put out there, and again, I'm listening to what you're saying and I'm thinking about the scenarios and such. When I think about research, there's multiple types of research, but I think of two types of research in particular. One is syndicated research and one is custom research. And typically custom research is proprietary to the owner of that or the requester of that information. And that's typically under lock and key and not shared unless the prospect or the person that has it wants to share it. Cool, all good. Syndicated research is research that's just out there and kind of known and such, and we want people to kind of use it. If I make any data points or anything that I'm trying to do, whether it's whether it's a joke or music or a book or whatever, if I make it available and the LLM can pick it up and the OpenAI or whatever can pick it up and use it, right? Then it's publicly available. If it's not publicly available, that's on me. I kind of put it under that lock and key, right? But if it's something that's out there and it's said, and if it's used word for word, Mike, to your point, if an engine uses it word for word, there needs to be attribution. That's plain and simple. But the thing that's concerning, and Alan, I think that you mentioned this, and I'm a little bit, I haven't seen, I've used these platforms, a long time as well. I haven't seen the analysis that you're talking about that takes and synthesizes data that's new data. It synthesizes it in a different way of saying it, but it's not like giving
when it makes up lies. Where do you think it's? And I don't want to use the word lie. When it hallucinates, where do you? That's new stuff.
Totally,
it made it up.
Totally, absolutely. And that's where if it's the user of the tool needs to have the accountability of using that information appropriately. You can't just use something verbatim that comes out of a chat engine that says, okay, this is what I'm going to use because it said it. And if it's a hallucination, well, if I did that in my reports, nobody would think I was credible. Right.
And if I change the words around your data point, I still stole your data point. So it's
correct.
Right. Well, it's a question of how artful you are on changing those words.
I want to ask Lisa a question about this. Are marketers watching all this? Because frankly, marketers and companies now publish as much stuff as publishers do, and they are creating mountains of copyrighted content. And so are they going to get pulled into this whole conversation?
They definitely are aware of this from a marketing perspective because CMOs that I talk to weekly, everyone's leaning into generative AI. Everyone's using it for copy creation, whether that's website copy, whether it's an email copy for an SDR to send to a customer. They have to be aware of that. From what I understand with the CMOs that I talk to, they've got internal guardrails on it. They're not opening the kimono to everybody. They're piloting these projects, and attribution is part of what they're evaluating. Obviously, if something goes awry, they're the ones responsible from a crisis communication and a brand reputation management perspective. But is on the radar at the CMO level? Definitely.
Interesting. Guys, I'd love to talk about this all day, but I've got other stuff to do. I'm sure Paul and Lisa, you do too.
We have day jobs?
This is your day job. It's a great thing if you can get it. Anyway, guys, Lisa, Paul, thanks for joining us on the gang today. My thanks as always. We had good discussions today. Most of all, thank you out there for watching this. I hope you have a great Friday. It's the gateway to a great weekend. We've got, as usual, a full Techstrong TV schedule right behind the gang. So don't go anywhere. Stay right here on your local Techstrong TV affiliate network and whatever you want to call it. and stay tuned for what other great stuff we have. But until next Monday, in terms of the gang, that's a wrap. This is Alan Schimmel. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.